President Biden decided to drop out of the 2024 presidential race. It is a historic move. Typically on Sundays, everyone thinks about quitting their job, but Biden is the first person to actually go through with it. I quit.
Joe Biden fired himself. He's the first person in the history of his administration to be fired for incompetence. At long last, some accountability in Washington. Sort of, kinda. Not really, of course. But now Kamala is the president of the United States. Do you see that? More or less. We're a disaster. Putin is howling like a dog in Moscow, having a riot. Xi Jinping, just loving what he's seeing going on in Washington. And the Democrat Party, too, and Hamas. Speaking of Hamas, you see the Democrats are all over town protesting Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli prime minister in town in Washington. No reception from anybody in the Biden administration when he landed at Andrews Air Force Base because they hate the Jews. Then Benjamin Netanyahu went to the Watergate complex, I believe at the Watergate Hotel, where he had a meeting with family members of Americans being held hostage, and the Jew-hating Democrats were outside. A mob of them were outside chanting their anti-Jewish hatred stuff, because that's just who the Democrats are today. They hate the Jews. Honestly, it's, the Catholics hate the Protestants, and the Protestants hate the Catholics, and everybody hates the Jews. At least all the Democrats do. Pretty amazing stuff we've got going on. Synagogues are already being secured because Benjamin Netanyahu may visit said synagogue. So they're locking it down tighter than a Trump rally. Hopefully the Secret Service is not in charge, but they might be. Might be diplomatic security. I'm not entirely sure. Remarkable times. We've got Joe Biden. He's not the president. Also, just see he's delegating the handling of Ukraine to the Treasury Secretary and the Secretary of State. Where is our Secretary of State, anyway? He is the most useless nub. What a lump on a government log this guy is. There are wars going on all over the damn place, and I think he's golfing on the Eastern Shore or something. He's not being Secretary of State. Outside of his house, over across the river from Washington, D.C., there's a permanent encampment of Jew-hating, Democrat, hippie, dope-smoking morons sleeping in front of his house for months now in tents and things with signs. They put up Jersey barriers around the protesters there. Man, oh man, I am telling you, just amazing stuff going on in the United States. And Nancy Pelosi finally got around to endorsing Kamala Harris. And Kamala, she was speaking yesterday. It didn't go very well because she doesn't speak very well. That's maybe why Barack Obama decided that he wouldn't endorse her, at least right away, because, we got a lot of stuff going on here. Oh, and the director of the Secret Service on Capitol Hill yesterday. What a piece of work this woman is. Just extraordinary stuff. And they leaked her opening statements to the press. And that led to use of some vulgar language in the committee room yesterday, in the committee hearing yesterday. Nancy Mace giving it her all, and using some, what was the term? Bourgeois, some kind of bourgeois, something like that. But remarkable hearing yesterday with the director of the Secret Service. Did not go well for her at all. Not at all. And we've got 70-year-old members of Congress walking around on the roof at the scene of the crime where the Democrat fired a shot and clipped the top of President Trump's right ear as he turned his head. And the head of the Secret Service, she said, Cheatle, she said, Kimberly, Cheatle, she said, oh, we can't have agents up there. It's a sloped roof. And this 70-year-old member of Congress said I was, doing ballet up there. I'm embellishing only slightly, but he was up on the roof walking around, and he couldn't believe the bourgeois answers that Kimberly Cheatle was giving to Congress yesterday. Our government lies a lot, and it's the Peter principle. animated, brought to life, like by the Disney Corporation. It's truly extraordinary stuff. And this woman who's for the moment at least, director of the United States Secret Service, I don't think she's going to have that job for very long. So we got a lot of moving parts today. Nancy Pelosi endorses Kamala Harris as Democratic nominee for president. The New York Times is excited to announce in the Circle Fest in a hot tub. And Kamala Harris secures enough delegates to be the Democratic nominee. That happened real fast. Did anybody vote for her? Did they have any primaries? Did they? Wait. In order to save democracy, they had to destroy it. So the Democrats who go around pretending that they're saving something, they're saving Hamas and Putin and Xi Jinping. I don't know what they're saving, but the Democrats, they don't need elections and primaries. The Politburo will tell you who the nominee is. It doesn't matter who voted for whom, because they're saving democracy by destroying it, by dismantling it. Piece by piece, bit by bit, slowly they turn. And Kamala suddenly says, we're going to have to see what we do about delegates. Now she's got more delegates than anybody's ever had in the history of delegate counts. It's pretty amazing. How'd that happen in 24 hours? And the party that hates money in politics raised $100 million in about 8 hours or something. Maybe it was 24 hours. That's what they say, that Kamala Harris has raised $100 million. Do you think Willie Brown contributed all those, any amazing stuff? Because, hey, here's a few bucks. Thanks. The Kamala Harris secures enough delegates to be Democratic nominee. How did that happen? Because that's pretty amazing. Just like that, boom, nothing at all. And she's got the requisite number of delegates to be the nominee. Lickety-split, as they say. They say that she's got 2,668 delegates, and you only need 1,976 delegates. You need 1976. She's got 2,668 delegates in no time, and there were no primaries. This is the Soviet Union. The Democrat Party is the Politburo. Well, they're the chief men, the Barack Obamas are the Politburo. And they are the Soviet Union. No delegate voted for. They're just falling into line. Achtung, goose-stepping together. Schnapp tu, schnell, schnell, raus, raus. Because, they're clicking their heels, and not so they can go back to Kansas, so they can go back to Moscow. These people are really amazing. $100 million and 2,668 delegates, when all you need is 1,976 delegates. And happened just like that. Isn't that amazing? Just great. And more good news, Beyonce has already announced that Kamala Harris can use her song Freedom. And the song Freedom is about being tied up and thrown into a dungeon and tortured in Iran. It's kind of weird. That's very strange. Yeah, for her presidential campaign. So now they got Beyonce, they got $100 million, they've got thousands of delegates. And just because the Politburo snapped their fingers, Achtung, they're not Americans. They're not American people. This is not an American system of choosing a nominee. This is the most corrupt thing the world has ever seen out of the United States of America. And the news media just can't wait to move their uvula to the side to take it all down. It's just amazing how corrupt our news media is. They're loving it. And they hate the Jews. Even their Jews hate the Jews. It's kind of an amazing thing we're watching here. So speaking of Kamala and the Jews, Benjamin Netanyahu came here to meet with Biden, and Biden said, no, I'm not going to do that. And there's nobody to greet Benjamin Netanyahu. They're under attack by the troglodytes of the world. And nobody to greet Netanyahu at the airport and at Andrews Air Force Base arriving, Joint Base Andrews. And now the headline is snubbing Netanyahu's address. Netanyahu's supposed to have a joint address to members of Congress, the House, and the Senate. And Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, would normally preside over the joint gathering. And she said, no Jews. I'm no Jew, she said, with a slight German accent, which I thought was kind of peculiar. Snubbing Netanyahu's address, Kamala Harris shows childish partisanship, the Washington Examiner headline. And then it's kind of an amazing story. It really is, because the next in line in the Senate, if the vice president is showing her anti-Semitism, and she pulled up her little skirt a little bit, and she's got a tattoo on her thigh that says, "Kill the Jews from the river to the sea," something like that. Just amazing stuff. But the vice president will not attend because the Jews are bad and Hamas is good. It's an amazing Democrat Party that we have here. And Hamas is on the side of the angels when it comes to the Democrats, who host after-school Satan Club, just by the way. And so who would it go to? Well, it turns out that a lot of the Democrats don't want anything to do with the Jews because, they're anti-Semites and racists, and they snuff out 40% of the black population in the womb, and they give out awards for it. The racist eugenicist Margaret Sanger Award. Hillary Clinton has one. Hanoi Jane Fonda has one. Pretty amazing stuff. And now Ben Cardin is going to preside at Benjamin Netanyahu's speech on Capitol Hill because VP Harris will be absent. And she's kind of like acting president because Joe Biden's been acting president for a long time, but he's not even acting as president anymore. Now, when the vice president is not there, then the president pro tem of the Senate, who is Democrat Senator Patty Murray of Washington, would normally be next in line, but she said death to the Jews from the river to the sea, and Patty Murray will not be there. And they're like, well, who's next in line? Who doesn't hate the Jews so much? And so they ended up with Ben Cardin as the person who's going to be presiding because the Democrat Party, again, it's the projection thing. They go around calling everybody Nazis, and then they want to kill all the Jews. Isn't that kind of peculiar? It's an odd combination of things, I think. Extraordinary stuff. So Benjamin Netanyahu will have some private meetings when he comes to Capitol Hill this week. The Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who is not a Jew-hating Democrat, is going to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu. The Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, will meet with Netanyahu. And because he's not a Jew-hating Democrat, just amazing stuff. And he is arranging a meeting with President Trump as well. Benjamin Netanyahu is. But the Democrats are wearing armbands and goose-stepping around the city of Washington and protesting outside the Watergate Hotel all day long yesterday against the Jew who's meeting with the family members of the hostages being held by Hamas. And in the meantime, and the Democrats are with Hamas because they're the left. And speaking of the left and the troglodytes from hell, radical Islam, CNN with a celebratory story. Hamas and Fatah, two Palestinian death cults, genocidal Jew haters, and the Democrats are in bed with them. Hamas and Fatah sign an agreement ending their division. They signed it in Beijing, in China, with the commies there, where the Politburo is in charge. And the Democrats here, they are the Politburo in the United States of America. They hate the Jews. They hate the Jews, too. So Palestinian factions, including rivals Hamas and Fatah, have signed an agreement on ending division and strengthening Palestinian unity. That means wiping out the Jews together in Beijing, China. And the Chinese actually announced it, the communists and the Democrats. Who are they with? Well, the Biden family has taken a lot of money from communist China, and they're with China. They're in bed with China, and they're naked, and they're wriggling all about. The announcement followed reconciliation talks hosted by communist China involving 14 Palestinian factions. There are 14, at least, factions, Palestinian factions. It's more Monty Python, right? Honestly, the Palestinian Resistance Front and the People's Front of Judea. And the Democrats are in bed with the Communist Chinese and with Hamas and Fatah. And They launch the Jew haters that are camped out outside Anthony Blinken's house while he does nothing for a living. They're the people outside of the Watergate Hotel where Netanyahu's meeting with the families of hostages. And they are anti-everything good and pro-everything bad, which kind of explains how Kamala Harris suddenly has 2,668 delegates and $100 million in campaign money overnight. Man, talk about pimping with the pros. These guys are breaking new ground here. And we are at 888-630-9625. All right, Michael, let's take a telephone call, shall we? Let's go to Chris, calling from Port Clinton, Ohio. Christopher, you are on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm great.
I'm kind of a regular, but I guess I don't understand why the Cheney deal is not being run over and over again. Why should have been the first thing I heard out of your mouth this morning, and it should be nonstop.
Tell me about the Cheney deal.
With Cheatle being their best friends and was the Cheney bodyguard for how many years?
This
stuff all adds up, doesn't it?
The current director of the U.S. Secret Service,
yeah.
Kim Cheatle, was on the Dick Cheney detail, is what you're saying.
Correct.
And there's another Cheney in the news today, and that is Liz Cheney, because there are Democrats talking about choosing Liz Cheney as Kamala Harris's running mate.
Isn't her and Cheatle like best friends? This all adds up. This stuff all adds up. You know, the mistake when they say it was a complete failure was that they missed Trump. That's probably what Cheatle's talking about.
Well, there are. You're suggesting that perhaps the Secret Service is not a trusted institution, and that perhaps they should be looked at. That perhaps they should be looked at as Paul. You're suggesting that they are co-conspirators. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. And they should put her back in front of Congress and ask her what her relationship is with the Cheneys, and has there ever been any discussions about Trump with the Cheneys and Cheatle?
Well, I believe that the director of the U.S. Secret Service was invited to be back on Capitol Hill to testify again today, and that she has declined the opportunity for some follow-up back and forth, and I've got a bunch coming up on her. Now, as many of you are likely aware, I like my conspiracy theories to come with mountains of evidence and proof of something shady, and not that Washington isn't full of shady characters and crooks and all that stuff, but the current director of the United States Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, has been in the Secret Service for about, on and off, for about 20 years. And she was on the security detail for Dick Cheney when he was vice president of the United States. And during 9/11, the attacks in 2001, September 11th, perhaps you heard about those attacks. They were in all the papers. And she was part of the team anyway. I'm sure she wasn't the senior person at the time with Cheney, but she was involved in escorting Dick Cheney on 9/11, 2001, to the secret bunker, to the underground bunker, because of the attacks in New York and Washington. She also provided security for Bill Clinton when he was president. And none of this should come as too much of a surprise, because that's what you do when you're in the Secret Service. You're part of security details for people like the vice president and the president of the United States, if you're doing real good, if you're doing great. Now, the people at the New York Times, they love her, which is problematic because they're an extremely corrupt institution. But what Chris was talking about there is The fact, what he's making reference to, that Kim Cheatle was on then Vice President Dick Cheney's security detail, including on 9/11, 2001. And it should also be noted that she was on Bill Clinton, who's not a Republican and not a Cheney, on Bill Clinton's security detail when he was president of the United States. She spent more than 20 years with the agency and provided security for President Bill Clinton, Vice President Dick Cheney, and other leaders. The New York Times is proud to type on her behalf, and this is actually in the New York Times today. She also provided security advice for PepsiCo, the Pepsi Corporation, and Doritos, when, interestingly enough, she left the Secret Service and then went back. Kimberly A. Cheatle, Secret Service Director, come under intense scrutiny after the assassination attempt against former President Donald J. Trump, is an agency veteran who helped protect Bill Clinton and Vice President Dick Cheney, typed by Tim Bulk at the New York Times. Ms. Cheatle joined the Secret Service in 1995. She will be leaving the Secret Service in 2024. That's my expectation. Of course, there is very little accountability in Washington these days. And spent more than 2 decades there before leaving in 2021 to lead the North American security operations for PepsiCo. PepsiCo. They make a soft drink, a soft beverage called Pepsi-Cola. She returned to the agency a year later in 2022 after President Biden asked her to serve as its director. Now, it's my understanding, because I've been told, that it was actually Dr. Jill Biden who wanted her to be the director of the Secret Service. But never mind that. In her 22 months as director, she ranks, the ranks of the Secret Service have grown, prompting claims from some employees that a focus on hiring more people with diverse backgrounds has hampered the agency, meaning DEI. Did you see, when the day President Trump was shot in Pennsylvania, you may have seen the 3 women, Secret Service women, wearing white shirts, open collars, dark suits, same as the men agents were wearing that day, white shirts, open collars, dark suits. And the 3 women, it has been noted, were 5'5" and protecting a man who's 6'3", and it's hard to shield a man's head who's 6'3" if you're 5'5". You have to bring a stepladder and unfold it, then take 2 steps, then fold it, then take 2 steps forward, and it's very complicated. But that has been noted, and there's a funny meme going around of the one woman who couldn't get her pistol back in the holster after 5 or 6 tries. Her nerves were a bit frayed that day. And there's a big thing like with a fireball behind her, like a Bruce Willis movie, and it says DEI hard, right? It's like Die Hard, but DEI hard, with the DEI hires at the United States Secret Service. And this is, what Democrats do. Ms. Cheatle is 53 years old. She's the second woman to lead the Secret Service. And former colleagues describe her as capable and career-focused, which is why she left and went to Pepsi, because of her career focus. And then the Democrats brought her back, likely because of her genitals. That's a very likely thing. And we'll leave some of the other details out there having to do with Jill Biden and her Secret Service. But perhaps we'll get back to that another day. Now, let's go to some of the audio from yesterday's events on Capitol Hill, where Kim Cheatle was testifying before the House Oversight Committee. And the Democrats, they spent the first hour or more talking about, we really need to ban guns, don't we? Hey, if there were no guns, then people couldn't shoot guns. Because, Democrats, if there's a chance to attack the Bill of Rights, and in particular the Second Amendment, or for that matter, the First Amendment, then Democrats will do that. Now, whether there's anything, and, Chris, back to the point that you made calling in from Ohio, whether there is anything, I say, well, she worked for the Secret Service and she was on Dick Cheney's detail. I don't necessarily consider that to be a red flag. I don't think that there's anything suspicious about that, since that's the job description. And she was also on President Bill Clinton's detail after being on Vice President Dick Cheney's detail, and that makes sense. That makes sense, too. That's the job, you know. But let's go to Kim Cheatle of PepsiCo. One of the funnier members of Congress yesterday suggested she should be back providing security for Doritos. And I didn't even know that PepsiCo owned Doritos and Frito-Lays, and I guess that means Cheetos, too, right? That's a pretty good combination. I think you got Pepsi and Cheetos and Doritos. Come on, that's not bad. All right, here's Kim Cheatle yesterday at the hearing talking about her leadership at the Secret Service and the day, J13, that a sniper shot Donald Trump, clipping his ear and missing total destruction by this much. I'm holding my right index finger 1 inch to the right of my right thumb. Here's Kim Cheatle yesterday.
The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed.
J13. It's, they got their January 6th committees and all that, and they had an ABC executive come in to produce it for TV. The J13 hearings ought to be held with the same kind of fanfare and media verve. That will never happen, of course. A Democrat member of Congress named Ro Khanna asked Ms. Cheatle, said, hey, the last time anything like this happened was in a long, long time ago, 1981, when Ronald Wilson Reagan, the risen Yahweh, was shot and wounded by John Hinckley, who's on the loose now, and Democrats can't wait to buy tickets to his guitar concerts and buy his T-shirts, because the Democrats are a bloodthirsty gang of ghouls. Here is Democrat Ro Khanna.
Would you agree that this is the most serious security lapse since President Reagan was shot in 1981 of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir, I would.
And, do you know what Stuart Knight did when he was in charge at the time of the Secret Service? Do you know what he did afterwards?
This is great.
He remained on duty.
He resigned.
Wrong again. But at least you know your history of the Secret Service. And that was kind of an amazing moment. I think if you're the director of the Secret Service, maybe you'd know about the attempted assassination of President Reagan and what the Secret Service did in response. That'd be like chapter 1 of your study guide when you take over as director of the Secret Service. Call me old-fashioned, but I think I'd read up on that stuff if suddenly I were the director of and I spent 20 years, I might know that. I spent 20 years in the Secret Service. Now I'm director. I might be able to answer that question correctly. But Stuart Knight, didn't get on with his career. Hey, all right, Reagan was shot, back to work. Hi ho, it's off to work I go. Come on, Ro Khanna was having none of that.
If you have an assassination attempt on a president, a former president, or a candidate, you need to resign.
You need to resign. Well, she's not going to resign. She's career-minded. I just read that in the New York Times. And because she's a career-oriented and a career-minded woman, how dare you sexist, suggest that she resign. Pretty remarkable things there. But good for Ro Khanna as a Democrat. Now, the chairman of the committee, James Comer, was having none of it either because, strangely, yesterday there was a group of members of Congress, Republicans, led by Republicans, and some Democrats were there too, and they went to the scene of the crime, and they got on a ladder, and they went up to the roof in question that she had said, well, we can't put agents there because it's sloped. It's a slanted roof. It's like, a lot of roofs are. I don't know if you ever lived in a house or, maybe driven by houses or something like that. You might notice that a lot of houses have peaks and they go down from there, which means that they're sloped. James Comer wasn't amused by what he was getting.
Can you answer why the Secret Service didn't place a single agent on the roof?
We are still looking into the advanced process and the decisions that were made.
Yep. Hang on. Yeah. Well, it's no agents on the roof. Well, there were decisions that were made. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a decision was made to put John F. Kennedy in a convertible Lincoln limo in Dallas, Texas that day, too. It was never done after that, however. And there are all kinds of questions that have yet to be answered. And she hasn't held a press conference, but she did do interviews with left-wing media where they fluffed her, and she was more open and forthcoming with media interviews, television media interviews, than she was on Capitol Hill yesterday. Congressman Stephen Lynch.
Did they confront him? Did they go up to him? Did they talk to him?
I do not have those details at this time.
She was doing a poor job of answering questions, of being the responsible adult in the room, a very poor job. Congressman Gary Palmer.
How many explosive devices were found on or near the site?
Again, I would have to defer you to the FBI.
Yeah, and explosives found at the site. Now, let me listen to that question one more time, because this is an interesting question. The would-be killer had a remote control device in his possession, and then we're told FBI they found explosive materials at his home. There were reports possibly explosive materials in his car, and there are questions explosive materials at the site, and Gary Palmer wanted to know about that.
How many explosive devices were found on or near the site?
Again, I would have to defer you to the FBI.
On or near the site, you see, at the site in Pennsylvania where President Trump's rally was being held, and she doesn't have an answer to that. There's one thing what comes to mind to you? You know what comes to mind to me? Waterboarding. Waterboarding comes to mind. I'm thinking that this woman might need the Perrier Spritz. I think to get a straight answer out of her is going to be challenging. It could be Gitmo for her. That's pretty amazing stuff. She's going to need a little sip of water before she starts telling the truth. Republican Congressman Andy Biggs had now again, just pause on that for a second. Were there explosive devices found at the site? I ain't going to punt. I'm going to pass the buck. She falsely said yesterday that the buck stops with her. The buck stops with her, and here she is passing the buck to the FBI in this case on the matter of explosive, IEDs, homemade explosives, maybe not so homemade, and a remote control device found on the person or the dead body of in his belongings, as they describe them after you're dead. Here are your belongings, or here are his belongings, because they don't give them back to you for the most part. But here's Andy Biggs. So are there explosives? And she passes the buck. And then, hey, wait a minute. Was he alone, or was there maybe someone else shooting at the same time? These are relevant questions you think she'd be able to answer.
Was he just a lone gunman?
I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation for motive.
Waterboard. That's not motive. I didn't ask you about motive. That's not what I asked you. All right, and I got to tell you, if I were a member of Congress, I think that I would work on the art of the follow-up question. I would notice that, well, you responded to a question that I didn't ask. Now, let me go back to the question that I did ask and see if you can respond to the question that I did ask. That'd be very helpful, I think. It'd be nice. Andy Biggs.
When was the last sweep of that roof done prior to the rally?
I do not have that information.
Again, waterboard. It's time for the waterboard. It's Gitmo for this one. You know, I'd rather be waterboarding. It's one of my favorite bumper stickers and T-shirts. I do have the I'd rather be waterboarding T-shirt. That was sent to me by a nice listener because I was talking about it. I was talking about how, my saying was I'd rather be waterboarding. And then about a month later, the T-shirts showed up online. I wasn't making T-shirts back then. Now making T-shirts. Yeah, so sweep on the roof? I don't know. Lone gunman? I don't know. Explosive devices at the scene? I don't know. I thought you said the buck stops with you. Do you know what those words mean? Do you know what the word waterboard means?
I would bring back waterboarding, and I'd bring back a hell of a lot worse than waterboarding.
Mr. Trump, thank you.
Now, a few minutes ago, I referred to Thomas Crooks as the would-be killer, and that was an incorrect characterization because he did murder. He murdered a Trump supporter, Corey Compatore. It was a would-be assassin, But he was a killer before he was shot and killed. Now let's go back to the telephones. Let's see, where are we going? We're going to Jerry calling from Leesburg, Virginia. Geraldo, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
How you doing, Chris? Can you hear me?
Yes, Jerry, I can.
All right. So I don't think, we shouldn't keep our guard down about Kamala, but I don't think America's going to really want to have a second female president after Dr. Jill failed so miserably the first 4 years. I just don't think we're going to go that direction. But I wanted to say two other things, if you didn't mind.
Sure.
So here's the thing. The president isn't of himself one branch of government. Every single time for the last few years when they said the president was fit and was healthy, they have falsified government records because they are giving an assessment of one branch of the government. So I want someone to be accountable for that.
That's a good point. I like that point. I also like you declaring Jill Biden to be the first female president and to have been a complete disaster since Joe Biden obviously hasn't been president and Jill Biden has kind of been playing the role of president. We can declare, okay, we've had a lady president. Now we've had an African-American president, African-American, and now we've had a lady president, and you think that we probably wouldn't want another lady president right after 4 years of Jill. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, not after such a poor job as she's done. The last thing I want to mention is they can change the campaign slogan from "Riding with Biden" to "Humming with Harris."
How's that? Should I interpret that to the way that you intend it to be interpreted? I think is what they "Humming with Harris." That should be the slogan. And everybody in California will get that. Am I right?
Yeah, yes, they would. But for radio purposes, we can just say it's a musical slogan.
It is a musical slogan. That is great. Great call, Jerry. That's wonderful stuff. Yeah. Do we want another after the terrible experience we've had with our first lady president, Jill Biden? Do we really want another one? And going from riding with Biden to humming with Harris, and falsifying records is a good point too.